In the past 2 weeks, Multiversus has been eating me alive. I did a quick video that I will be honest, I was kind of just phoning it in on my main channel. I was not really super interested in making a Multiversus video at the time. I just was like, oh, this is a video that will get me views. There's probably going to be people who are wondering my thoughts on it. It's a win-win. Get up there, get a few views, maybe gain 2 or 3 subscribers. Yippee. But since that video, I've been playing the game even more. And in that scripted, lovely little video, I basically repeated the sentiment that I shared about the open beta, where there was so many things that I liked, but there was so many more things that I disliked that frustrated me so deeply. And that is still very, very, very much the case. It's crazy to me just how different Multiversus is from its open beta, and how many things that it kind of reiterates on and like changes. But it's even more crazy to me how much stuff they took away from us, right? Because when the game launched, you couldn't play as locked characters in training mode. They fixed that, and everybody's like, oh yay, they fixed that, hooray! But there's still the elephant in the room that you can't play as them in local play, which means that like any sort of like local tournament for Multiversus is just screwed because it's an always online game. And so that means every setup will have to have its own account. And then it means that every account has to have all the characters unlocked. And that's not an easy feat. That's not an easy feat to accomplish, especially when they took the open beta system, right, of the gold, and they changed it to a new currency, and then they made it even slower than it was before, which is crazy to me because they made progression so much slower than it was at the end of open beta, which is interesting because at the end of open beta, progression was even slower than at the start of the open beta. For example, character mastery, right? In the open beta, character mastery just got you, I think it just got you more gold, and then you got a profile pic at the end of it. And they took that, and then they basically doubled the amount of time it takes to reach full character mastery, like level 15. And then now, in the full launch, they nerfed the nerf. And so now it feels like it's a third of its original progression rate, which is so annoying for me because in the open beta, I enjoyed the characters so much. Multiversus was a game that I really hated going against certain characters, especially the meta characters like Tom and Jerry, Wonder Woman, Bugs. Like and the current meta is still an issue, right? But my point is that with that, in the open beta, I loved playing as every character. And so I actually went out of my way to try and max out the mastery for as many characters as I could. And I had gotten about like 2/3 of the way through when they nerfed the character progression mastery, where they made it harder to level up because you basically just got half as much XP. And that completely shot my desire to 100% the cast in the foot, which is dumb because since they want you to play each character and they want you to buy each character, they should be making systems that feel like it's rewarding and it's engaging and it's addictive, honestly. But instead, they make everything feel like a snail's crawl to where, it feels like a realistic goal now would be to reach level 15 with one character. Back when the open beta, it felt like you could do it with every character. You could reach that max mastery. And it's really frustrating to me because it feels counterintuitive when they're wanting you to feel like when they're wanting you to play multiple characters, right? They want you to be like, oh, this new character came out, let me buy them, and I'll grind the game or I'll use my Gleamium. Like you think they would want you to buy characters. But then the character progression system is so inflated that it feels like it's meant to be focused on just who your main is, that I don't really think that that's what their goal is with the system anymore. And maybe it's because they added Gleamium as a reward for level 15. Like, maybe that's the reason why. But that doesn't feel like a worthwhile reward. Like, what is it? 150 Gleamium? 100 Gleamium? Let's just say 150. Let's give them that extra 50, even if it's not actually there. Or it is, I don't know. Like, the amount of time that it's going to take to do that, like, that is $1. That's $1. That's like $1.25. That's $1.25. That's $1.25 of Gleamium. And I've played the game like at least 20 hours, right? At least 20 hours since full launch, probably more. I switched to Epic Games Launcher because on Epic Games Launcher I can use my support a creator code. And so if I made any purchases, which unfortunately I admit I did fall victim to making a purchase, and now I removed my credit card. I removed my credit card from the launcher, and so if I want to spend more money on Fortnite or Multiversus, I can't just do it impulsively. I have to go grab my wallet, and then I have to pull out my card, and I have to put in the card information again. It's basically a way to make it more difficult for me to spend money. If you struggle with microtransactions, I recommend you try something like that. But I switched to Epic Games Launcher, and so like it's hard to fully keep track of how much hours I've played. But actually, I can pull that up right now, and I'm going to pull that up because I think they added it where you can see how many hours you've played. So, but I've played the game a lot. 35 hours. Okay, but I've probably like left it open overnight once or something. So I've definitely gone over 20. And 20 hours, I've played LeBron probably about a fourth of that time. He's my highest level character, and he's only level 9. And so let's say if I did a fourth, right, that's 4 hours. I have a job that pays me way more than the rate for 150 Gleamium. Like, that's just a waste of time. And so I feel like I would rather have continued to have like the profile pics or like some sort of like small cosmetic as a reward, and you like lower that cap. I just think that's like way more engaging and enticing to the systems that they want to promote. Like, I think it makes it more fun for me. And I think the way that they're wanting the gameplay loop to function, I think it's way better for that as well. But yeah, that's the thing. There's so much about Multiversus, right? I was complaining about how you can't use locked characters in local play, and it transformed into this huge thing. That's just how Multiversus is that like some small complaint just snowballs into this huge problem. And it's so frustrating to me because I really like elements of the game. Like, the character design in this game, I think, is completely unique. Sometimes it drives me up the walls, but there's not another Platfighter character that functions visually or mechanically the same way as like Tom and Jerry or LeBron James or Jake the dog, or like the cast is just full of these like unique designs and interpretations, but then they're executed in such annoying ways. Like, Finn has these really cool things where he's very like in your face, and he has a lot of combos that move him around, and he has like the charge attacks, like where he holds the position and can move around and stuff. That's very unique. That's very unique for like a rushdown sortie. But then it's executed in a way where he always just feels like he's mashing. Like, instead of it feel like he's committing and like, you know, dash dancing with like, I don't know, an up air or up tilt. Instead of it feeling like that, it feels like he's just mashing. Or Tom and Jerry, like that sort of push and pull between like shooting Jerry and then the tennis rackets, the dynamite, the fishing hook, and all the traps of like where it feels like they're more against each other than working together. Like, those sort of elements are kind of done and handled so overwhelmingly. Like, it's just so overwhelming that it doesn't come off as that sort of game of cat and mouse between the two. It comes off as just like spam. Like, it feels like you shoot Jerry, you shoot all your tennis balls, you whack all the tennis balls at once, you throw the dynamite, you do the fishing rod, you put down the mousetrap, and then when the mousetrap is down, you literally just stand right over the mousetrap, so that way if your opponent tries to engage with you at all, they get hit by the mousetrap, and then you just rinse and repeat. And it's really frustrating because the devs clearly notice that a lot of the gameplay can turn out to be that sort of just frustrating, overwhelming toolkits. But their way of balancing it is not to slow things down. Well, slow down like the tools and how much you can use them, or like how do they actually incorporate with each other and stuff like that. What they do is they just add cooldowns, which is so mind-numbing to me because it makes things so much more harder to read, to process, to understand. Okay? And a few cooldown moves are fine. I'm not completely against cooldown moves. But like Tom and Jerry, for example, right? That mousetrap, their down special, that's a cooldown. They have the dynamite they throw out as a down special, that's a cooldown. But then the down special, if you have like a signature perk equipped, then it like is stronger, but then uses more of the ammo, and so it's like a different cooldown. And then they have their up special, which is a rocket, which is a cooldown. Then they have the Jerry shot, right? And the Jerry shot in itself isn't a cooldown, but then when Jerry's out and you press neutral special again, you throw the tennis balls, which are like an ammo system, which give it a cooldown. And then if Jerry dies, you have a cooldown until you get Jerry back. And there's probably other cooldowns that I'm not thinking about for Tom and Jerry. And then you get into like Batman, right? Batman, he has the down special with the smoke grenade that like conceals him, but then if they get hit in it, they also apply weaken. And that's the thing. There's so many debuffs in this game. There's so many debuffs that don't need to exist. Like there's the like silence debuff, and then like the there's that. That's the one that like Rick's little like nut thing that he uses as his up air or whatever. That's like it like silences you, and I think it means you can't like do special attacks or something. And that's kind of my point, is that there's so many, because there's like the silence, there's the thing that turns you into a dog with Rick, there's ignite, ice, static shock or whatever. I'm trying to think of ones that solely apply to normal PvP, because PvE has a lot of debuffs and stuff like that too, but I'm kind of ignoring that because those are more like moment to moment, and typically there's like a giant thing saying like, hey, this is something you need to worry about specifically on this level. So I'm kind of going to give those ones an omission. But then there's like, oh, the rose, right? Like the thing that like puts you in a bubble with Steven. And then like with Harley, right, you can have the perk that ignites melee attacks after hitting a projectile. But then Harley has her own ignite system that functions differently, but then uses the same terminology and the same iconography. But then like it takes like 5 hits and you have to trigger it with like certain moves. And then you have gray health, and then you have armor. And then there's just so much overwhelming information between debuffs and cooldowns that it can be overwhelming in 1v1s. But then you put that shit into 2v2s. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. You can't do that. Oh. And it's really interesting because like going into the full launch, they slowed the game down. And so part of me was thinking like maybe they like reevaluated like how can we change the pace? How can we tweak things to make things more manageable, right? But it really feels like they didn't at all. Like it feels like the most they've done to handle this problem is that there's certain things that were cooldowns that are no longer cooldowns. Like Black Adam's lightning when he does up air, that used to be a cooldown. Now it's not. I think it's weaker now, but it's like an actual part of his kit where it's like, oh, I can like knock them back down and then go for like a follow up or a read. And I think that's really cool. That's a really good example of like that. Yeah. That's a really good example of like multiverses should focus on, like, in my opinion, they should focus on getting rid of cooldowns and instead just like making things weaker but more consistent. Because it feels like the devs are like, oh, we made this really strong option here that like makes this character busted, and you know, like how do we prevent them from just using this move over and over? And then their answer is to just put it on a cooldown, which doesn't make the move less broken. It just makes it less used less often, which, like, if you have to use it like as like a resource, like, sure, I get it, but they over rely on it too much. Like, if every character had like one cooldown, I think it would be far more manageable. Like, LeBron James only has one cooldown, and it's for getting his neutral special to summon another ball. And it feels like LeBron is designed in a way where his kit is weaker because he only has one cooldown. But when none of the other characters are like that, where they either just don't rely on cooldowns or they have a bunch of cooldowns, it makes him feel like a mid tier or a low tier because they like his options are like more stubby. Like his dunk, they keep nerfing his dunk, and then his side special doesn't go very far. His up special doesn't go very far as a recovery option, and then his moves are kind of stubby. Like, they don't have very much reach on them, so they lose to disjoints a lot. And then his only projectile is something that is a resource, and if he throws it out, he either has to spin his neutral special and it goes on cooldown, or he has to do his down special, the reflective ball, or, you know, that sort of thinking, right? But that sort of flow should be what you strive for. But then you have something like Tom and Jerry, bringing up Tom and Jerry again, right? So LeBron uses his resource. Let's say he uses his neutral special and then he misses that ball too. So now he has two options. Wait for the well, I guess he would have three. He has three options. Run away, wait for ball to come back, summon ball. Option number 2, just hit the mother truckin' Tom and Jerry. Or option 3, reflect one of Tom and Jerry's projectiles. And so option 1 is an option. All right. The cooldown lasts a while. You're going to have to be dodging, evading, kind of playing a little bit like a rat, which is kind of ironic considering I was talking about Tom and Jerry. And then with option 2, which is to hit Tom and Jerry. Now, when LeBron doesn't have the ball, he's stubby as is. But then when he doesn't have ball, his moves that are still fast are even stubbier, like his Nair. Or they're slow, like his fair or his dare or his up air, where they're very laggy and they're very punishable. And so trying to hit Tom and Jerry, you're going to have to go through their projectiles, and you're going to have to go through their massive disjoints and strong attacks. So often doing that, you typically, if you're trying to get a hit with Tom and Jerry, you either have to do a pretty good mix-up, a good bait, or do an combined option of option 1 and option 2. Like, very often, if I'm going to hit someone, I'm going to be running away and then kind of just do a mix-up where, like, I'll side special in while they're chasing me, or doing like a retreating fair, because the fair actually has a decent amount of reach, but it does no knockback and it's slow. And so that's typically how it works. But then there's the third option. The third option is the one you think would be the best for the matchup flow, right? And so LeBron's down B, he can, like, it's called like defense, and it's just like the letter D and a fence in the background. It's very funny. And basically what happens is LeBron in this stance, if he gets hit with a projectile, he gets ball back and it gets rid of the projectile. Sounds simple, but there's two issues. One, it doesn't work on every projectile. And so you have to like have the matchup knowledge of like what certain things will count as a projectile or not. And overall, it's pretty easy to remember that. Usually like the big projectiles that are considered like heavy projectiles, they don't reflect. But I'm still not going to pretend that it doesn't make things even slightly more confusing. And then the second problem is that when I talked about like Tom and Jerry's toolkit, right? They throw out multiple projectiles at once. They throw all the tennis balls. They do the Jerry shot and the tennis balls, and they do the dynamite and do that. LeBron, the moment he gets his ball back with down B, he's immediately vulnerable to projectiles again. And so it's not a good option when your opponent has more than one projectile. And very often, the cooldown system rewards players for spending all of their cooldowns at once in this like keep of just huge aggression, like the Tom and Jerry, right? They do the Jerry shot, all the tennis balls at once, do that, and then the mousetrap, or they mix up the order, and then it incentivizes that because it's like throwing the kitchen sink at them. And so when they do that, LeBron can't parry it because he can parry like the first thing, but then he's not going to parry all of the tennis balls or the cork from Jerry. That's another one I forgot, that Jerry has his own ammo system. Or the dynamite or the rocket. Like there's so many things that like don't interact consistently that cause the game to feel confusing. And that's something that is like correlative between the whole cast. And I'm just using LeBron as an example because LeBron is the character I have the most experience with these sort of frustrations. And there's a lot of other games where they have a lot of like one-to-one interactions that you just have to know. Smash Bros is a lot like that. Like in Smash Bros, I think of like Snake Grenade, right? Fire attacks immediately cause it to blow up. And the same goes for like Link's Bomb. And so like there's these sort of like world rules where it's not so much the fighting game elements being like, oh, this is what happens. It's like, oh, this is like, fire would cause explosives to go off early, so therefore fire make explosives go off early regardless of how it like changes the matchup. Like it's sort of that sort of like random element to it. But with Multiversus, there's no logic. There's no logic behind that. Like there isn't like, oh yeah, fire would make a grenade blow up early, so therefore, anytime use a fire attack on one of Snake's grenades, it's just going to blow up early. No, it's just like, yeah, so Jerry doesn't count as a projectile that LeBron can reflect. Even though, like, we used to have it as one, but then we changed it. And then, you can reflect the tennis balls before they're hit with the racket, but you can't reflect Jerry, who's like an active projectile. And then it's like you can't hit Bugs Bunny's safe to get ball back, or you can't hit like stage hazards to get ball back. It doesn't count. Like it has to be a real player. But then I guess you can like hit Mojo Jojo's saucer and then get ball back that way. Like there's so many just like random things that are a case by case situation with how this gameplay is, but there's no logic to it. Or if there is, it's very, very flawed and very minimal. And so, just. And so you combine that with the cooldowns. So you take all that issues with the gameplay, like the perks, like the cooldowns, like the debuffs, and then you combine it with like all the confusing like perk systems and like the currencies and the rewards. And Multiversus is a game that genuinely makes me feel two things simultaneously. One, it activates the goop in my gamer brain and I see numbers go up all the time and it makes me happy. And then two, it gives me a headache because there's so much stuff to keep track of that it is constantly overwhelming and it is constantly overstimulating. And, it's kind of frustrating because, like I said, I love certain elements of this game. I love the like clear passion that goes into the content that the game delivers. Like this game is packaged and monetized like free to play slop, but then you look at the things that it's actually producing. Like you look at Jason, you look at Joker, you look at all the new characters, you look at all the open beta characters too, and you can see that there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of unique ideas in this. And you look at the PvE mode too. Like they have several unique boss fights that really surprised me. Like I'm really surprised with like how varied the PvE mode is like proving to be. But then it's packaged in a way that makes you hate it. The grind to unlock new characters or to progress their mastery is just completely infuriating and is actively working against you. And then you go into the PvE mode and it's the exact same thing, because the way they set up rewards for the PvE mode is like they want you to play every difficulty. And it's so annoying because it's like essential. Especially with like the Agent Smith event thing, right? It's like almost essential that you do everything you possibly can in PvE mode, which sucks the soul out of it. Like they have such good and interesting like intro cinematics. Like the Jason one's awesome. The Joker one's pretty good too. Which the Joker one is more of just like the Joker reveal, right? And then like there's some like lower quality ones. Like I think the one that plays right before you do the Stripe boss fight, like that one's just kind of like meh, kind of thrown together. But it's still like an honest attempt. And then they have like these honest attempts to like weave a narrative with it too, even if it's like locked behind like boring text boxes. But then they want you to play it like 3 or 4 times. And like they want you to like play it to perfection, and then they like set up the reward system to like put you in situations where it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you have to, you know, have a character who wears a graphic T-shirt here to progress, or you have to own this character, and it's like clearly there to make people want to spend money, but there's no reason to do that unless you feel like you're gonna get something in return. And so like they have these like certain goals you have to meet to like level up your gear, or they're called gems, but they're really just like equipment where it's like, oh, you know, you got to level this stuff up and it makes you stronger. And then you make you once you're strong enough, you can go fight the harder guys, and the harder guys are stronger. So you have to like, you know, grind even more. It's all just kind of damning because like, yeah, at the day of recording, they added the technical horror or whatever it's called, but it's basically the PvE mode with a bunch of matrix code. They have like this unique little mode with the computer hack, and they have like these bread toasts following you around, and then the final boss is against this huge mecha robot, which is a reference to a Dexter's Laboratory episode, and it's all super duper cool, but I didn't enjoy any of it because in the back of my brain I was like, I'm gonna have to do this 3 or 4 times. And it's either going to be soul-crushingly difficult or soul-crushingly easy after this. And so there's never like a sense of actual fun, despite there being very fun things in this game. The way, like, yeah, it's a really good way that I think I would put it, is that there's just so much that this game has that's fun, and then they package it in a way that just completely sucks the freaking fun out of it. Like, they have such unique character designs and toolkits that instead of actually balancing with considering how their toolkit works, they suck the freaking fun out of it by making everything a cooldown that just complicates things, makes things way too snowball momentum, and they give all these stupid perks that they want you to like, you know, have to grind the characters for, and then, you know, you get like barely anything for interacting with the game's systems. Like, you know, you toast people, they only get 5 fighter currency when the cheapest characters cost 3 freaking thousand. And so, you know, what they should be doing is that they should be rewarding the player in a way where it's like they want you, that encourages them to engage with its systems. But instead, because they want you to end up spending money on that freaky gleamium. What they do instead is they just completely stifle any sense of like actual ingenuitive design or progression for the sake of like making it seem like you're making progress, to make the idea of just spending $10 way more enticing. Like, spending $10 for the Joker, honestly, like, a little expensive. Like, I think 5 would be like a good amount of money for me. But it's not the worst thing in the world. But then there's so many things, just so many small things with this game's systems that just make it feel frustrating. Okay. So like at the end of the day, like when I think of multiverses in my head, first off, I make like a noise, like a grrr. Like genuinely, my brain goes like, ugh. But if I were to like make a dumb analogy for it, like multiverses is your abusive ex. Multiverses is your abusive ex, because like for me it feels like that, because there's so many things that like when I'm thinking about multiverses, it's like, oh my god, that's bad. But then there's moments where like, you know, when you think about your past with like someone or something, you largely tend to focus on one side or the other. Like you think of like the positive experiences you had with an ex, or you think of the negative experiences that you had with an ex. But then there's like certain kinds where like if you're mistreated or there's just some bad stuff going on, a lot of times there's some crossed wires where you can't really like truly process something for its true value of, you know, overall good or overall bad. And this is a horrible analogy here. Kind of regret making it, but hey, I'll make a good YouTube video title, don't you think? There's certain points where like you have to sit down and say, yeah, okay, like my brain is tricking me and gaslighting me into thinking that that was good for me, and that you know, like I need to go back, and that things could be different now, or that, you know, maybe he's changed, maybe he's better. But then, you know, you kind of like step into that pool and you're like, oh god, this is shit. Like Multiverses has changed a lot since the last time we were together, but oh my goodness, at the core, they still have the same flawed issues, and they're not interested in becoming a better person for you as much as it is getting more out of you. You know, if that makes sense? And so Multiverses is going to continue to be something that's just bittersweet for me. And I'm going to be honest, I should probably just stop playing it. But the small amount of fun that I'm still having with it is still enough for me to just kind of hold on to it for a little longer. And, you know, I shouldn't be giving it a second chance. I shouldn't be giving my abusive ex Multiverses another chance. But the dumb chemicals in my brain want to feel loved and want to believe that when Multiverses says that he's changed, that he really is. Jeez, that's so dumb. I'm sorry.